Hi, everyone. Welcome to Misconceptions. I am excited to welcome kind of a unique guest today. I'm very thankful to have met Rikki Spivak at a conference a few months ago and heard a little bit about what you were doing. And I was like, I want to hear more about what you're doing. And so this conversation welcomes a discussion between a therapist and an occupational therapist, so two different kinds. And we're going to be talking about some of the ways that the body reacts to trauma. And we're going to start with a little bit of a discussion of kind of like setting the stage of why are we here and why am I talking to an OT about things that are maybe typically might even fall with under the discipline of a sex therapist or a clinical therapist of some form. And so welcome, Rikki Spivak. So glad you're here.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this. I'm excited to share a little bit about what I do and how OT can be a very important adjunct into helping a lot of women who may be suffering and not know what else they can add to their recovery.
Yeah. It's really interesting actually at PSI, Postpartum Support International conferences over the last, I would say 3 to 5 years, there's been an influx of OTs. And I remember thinking that, maybe the primary focus of the OT was about helping them navigate like executive function, like things like how do I pack a diaper bag? We've talked quite a bit about ADHD or managing household responsibilities and all the things that, kind of create the structure of a home life can feel so overwhelming. But you're bringing a different angle. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your history in terms of your professional history. Who are you and what brings you to this conversation?
Sure. So I've been a pediatric OT for over 25 years. So I was doing that for a really, really long time. And my interest was always focusing on the emotional regulation of the kids that I work with, making sure that they feel very safe and comfortable, because I believe that children and really any person can only learn and grow from a place of safety. So that was always my focus. A couple of years ago, when I started a private practice, so I wasn't working with school age anymore, I was working with older kids and then sort of moved into working with young adults and adults. And I actually got into this field through working with kallahs, that there were an endocrinologist actually reached out to me that she had just done an examination of a young kallah who could not be touched. And she didn't know how this girl was going to get married. So she asked, since I have the background in sensory and since I work on emotional regulation, is this something that I can do? So I
Hmm.
met with this young woman and really was able to get her to a place of feeling safe and comfortable with the prospect of touch in her life using a lot of the tools that I've always used. So I think that what OT brings into sort of the discussion is that what we focus on as OTs, right? It's not just about fine motor. That's a detail. We look at function. We're looking to see, where is this person right now? Where do they want to be? What is the meaningful occupation, the meaningful thing they want to do in their life? And what is standing in the way? How can we either remove the blockages or work around that or adapt something in some way to get them to where we want to be? And part of the OT training is there's a huge amount of mental health training. A third of our education is mental health. So there's a lot of background there, plus a lot of additional training. Once I started doing this and working with more and more young women and kallahs and newlyweds, I took a lot of additional training in polyvagal theory. I got started. There's something called the Institute of Sex and Occupational Therapy. So I took the training there and became a certified sex occupational therapist. So there's a lot of focus on the different things that can impact someone's sexual performance and ability to participate in that occupation. So that's a lot of training that I took to really be able to understand what are those blockages, what are the things that are getting in the way, and how can we help people achieve the sexual performance that they want.
So let's divide this out by female male. Because I think I think probably most people will be more comfortable understanding the female body's reactivity to touch, but I want to take it in both directions. So let's start with the women. What are some of the components of, let's call it sensory based experiences that are complicated for some women that might have them end up in your office?
That's an excellent question. So there's a things that are sort of inborn, right? Some people have sensory sensitivity. Some people have tactile defensiveness. Some of it was addressed in childhood, sometimes not. But very often, as people get older, they create their own environments that are safe for them. So they don't have to wear a uniform anymore. They're wearing the clothes that they choose. They don't have to sit in uncomfortable chairs. They don't have to be friends with everybody. So they generally choose a lifestyle that's matching their sensory comfort and it works for them. And then all of a sudden, this new factor has come into play called marriage, called sex, called a husband. And they don't know how to deal with that because they have been creating safety for themselves for so long. The idea of inviting another person into such a personal, intimate space is terrifying. Many girls just don't want to date or freak out once they get engaged, but some just kind of push through because that's what you have to do. And now they're married and they never wanted someone in their personal space to this degree. So in those
Okay, wait, so hold
situations,
on just
yeah.
one second, because I'm like, first of all, I love the language of tactile defensiveness. I wrote that down. But I'm also thinking how the religious structure in which we are living really kind of enhances the ability to stay protective for a much longer period of time. Meaning, if I was a
Yes.
boyfriend girlfriend, there would be the expectation of gradual growth in touch. I'm going to use that, maybe I'm an old lady, but like the idea that
No,
you don't get to first
that's
base on the
very good
first,
phrasing.
right? Right. Like we would
Yeah, and I
gradually
use that
become,
example.
right. So we would
Right.
gradually become accustomed.
We're going from 0 to 100
It's
in,
terrifying.
a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
And that is so much without tactile defensiveness. That is way more than the typical system can handle.
Right.
And, how do we define trauma, right? Too much, too fast, right? That's
Out of
all
control.
happening,
Right.
right? And that
Okay.
is the other group of people that I see, people who were fine and they were looking forward to marriage and they were interested and excited. And because there was societal or religious pressure to ensure consummation either on the wedding night or the next night, and they just weren't ready, there was a trauma there. There was a trauma
Hmm.
that I don't have agency over my body. I have to do something that I don't want to do. I have to let someone into my body before I am ready. And I can't say no. I can't say no because then I'm doing a terrible thing. And maybe I'm putting him in a terrible situation. And maybe I'm ruining our marriage. And maybe I'm not being a good wife. I can't say no. And my catchphrase is we can't say yes unless we can say no. If I
Yeah.
can't say no to something, then I'm not truly saying yes. I'm just kind of going with the de facto reality.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to say yes, which means we have to say, I'm not ready yet. And a lot of young women are not given the permission to say, I need a little more time. I'm not ready yet. Can we go a little slower?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's sort of another group. And then there's just people who have experienced trauma, who have experienced true sexual trauma in their lives. And now they're trying to create something new. And maybe they've been through a huge amount of therapy and processed all the trauma and are excited and love their fiance and are really ready to get married. And they trust them so much, but their body never went through that process. So their mind went through that process, but their body is still
Right.
living with trauma. Their body still remembers the trauma, and their body has not had any positive, safe, or trusting experiences with this man.
Right,
And
because we haven't. So just to clarify, I just
because
want to
they haven't
clarify
touched.
because we haven't touched. So I just want to clarify. I do have listeners in my audience that are not as familiar with the religious traditions, and so in a religious Jewish couple, it is common, not 100% of the time, but most you kind of recommended and common that boys and boyfriend, girlfriend, fiancés will not touch at all until the day that they are married. And so you go from 0 to 100, or the in between. Oops, we shouldn't have done that. But in general, there's this restrictive to fully permissive within a 24-hour period, right? Within a very short period of time. And so that's why this is even more extreme, I think, than the general population, where there, even for those that have, especially for those that had a history of child sexual abuse, that there has been no experience of safe, connected touch female to male. And if your abuser was male, you have no other reference point at all. I
Right.
do
And
want to bring up,
usually these,
yeah,
yeah. No, so usually they're avoiding touch with female also. So there's
yeah.
no concept of safe touch. And again, this is where the fact that I'm an OT is so beneficial because part of my license includes touching my clients, right? A trauma therapist can't touch their clients for the most part and feel safe. I can. So we do gradual introduction to safe touch and we talk about boundaries. We talk about trust. We talk about safety. We check in and I'll start off touching their hands, but I'll get a massage table out and we'll get to the point where I'm able to touch their body in a way that feels trusting, that feels safe, that feels respectful of what they want. And now they have a baseline experience that can counter the previous experiences. And I say, oh, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for touch that feels safe, that feels warm, that feels welcoming, that feels respectful. I can recreate that with my husband. And then we work through, how can you communicate your needs? How can you communicate your boundaries? How can you make sure that he understands them so that you feel safe enough to
Mhm.
allow him to touch you in this way? And that's sort of what we practice.
So I would like you to clarify when you say I am allowed to touch my clients, what are your boundaries in the touching of your clients? Where do you create, meaning you're not a massage therapist unless you can function? I don't know. Is this something within your licensure that you would have them disrobed on the table? Is it something where you're like, this is purely with clothing and it's just parts of your body that are not considered private? Like, what's your boundary professionally?
So as an OT, right? If I was working in a hospital, I would be helping patients get dressed. I would be helping patients go to the bathroom. I would be helping patients shower. So anything that is a life function and helping patients do that is all under the licensure of an OT. And I think that's very context dependent. So in my office, which is not a hospital, I don't take off anyone's clothing. And that's, sort of a personal boundary. If there's a situation where someone wishes to go beyond what I would normally do in a standard case, I have an additional release that we sign, very clearly labeling out what I will do, what I will not do, what is the purpose of it, to make sure that we understand very clearly what the therapeutic boundaries are for what we're about to do. I won't touch anyone sexually. I won't do anything that would be sexually stimulating. That's not the goal. This is not about being comfortable with sexual stimulation. This is about being comfortable with touch and being comfortable with letting someone into your personal and private space. So it's a discussion that I would have with the client. This would really be very down the road. Like, we would have already done a huge amount of touch before any of this topic would come up. But if they said, I really do want to be comfortable being touched directly on my skin, so we would outline, which parts of your skin do you feel comfortable with me touching? Which parts of your skin would I feel comfortable and would I feel okay touching?
Mm.
And we would have a very clear outline of what that would be and what the purpose of that would be. The purpose would be desensitizing that skin to the touch of another person.
Right. I'm wondering why I'm having such a reaction to it. I think possibly because it's just so unfamiliar to me, meaning I'm very comfortable and knowledgeable about pelvic floor physical therapy, which is incredibly
Right,
sexual and intimate. Well, it's not
right.
sexual, but it's very intimate,
It
right?
is, it's
And
very intimate. And,
touching
as
every
an
parts of your
OT,
intimate spaces,
yeah,
right?
as an OT, it would be well within my license to help a girl learn how to put in a tampon.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That is an ADL that she needs to learn. And there are many
Mm,
OTs, especially working with people with physical disabilities, people with cognitive disabilities, who would have to teach them how to do that.
right.
So
Right.
that's not
Right.
different, right? This
Right.
is an
It's true.
ADL
No. Yeah.
that you want to learn. There's a lot of, religious activities that happen within the realm of going to the mikveh, for example, that some people need help with. I
Yeah.
can't do it by myself. Either physically, I can't do it by myself, or I'm so overwhelmed by the enormity of this task that I can't do it by myself and I need help. And I'm an OT. That's what I do. So again, we have a
Got
separate
it.
release that we sign specifically for that, describing what's going to happen, what are the parameters, and then yeah, I will help them learn how to put in a tampon or how to do anything else that they
How to
may
do a
wish
badika.
to do.
Hmm. Right.
Exactly.
Okay. So I'm also just noticing one other area as we're discussing it today, in the after, let's say at postpartum, there's such a physicality component of postbirth with the newborn. Even in the moments where we talk about like skin to skin and like how, I never wanted skin to skin, that initial moment of like, it wasn't such a big thing when I gave birth to my children. It wasn't like this hyper emphasis as it is today, but like skin to skin where you put the baby on your chest. And frankly, that baby is slimy and that baby is covered in blood and gross stuff. And like that definitely did not appeal to me. Right. But I was like, clean the baby up and then bring the baby back and then that'll be fine with me. But I know that there's a lot of pressure today for women to have that baby put right onto their skin or right onto their chest or to immediately put the baby on the breast. And I have to imagine that for women who have difficulty with sensory related stuff or with that, tactile defensiveness, because I'm just going to use that word as often as I can because I like it, right? That idea of like, here comes this slimy, squirming new being, maybe crying, maybe not, And it is must be so utterly overwhelming for them to feel that baby on their body. Do you hear that as well? Or then to begin lactation, right? Like to begin feeding.
Absolutely. So the sensory system, if we can imagine it like a huge bucket with a small spigot at the bottom. So as the sensory information comes in through all of our senses and all of our experiences, it is filling up that bucket. And all of that sensory information has to be processed by the brain. And that's sort of the spigot at the bottom. And it sort of empties out the bucket. Birth is such a huge amount of sensory information, internal, external, the lights, the sounds, the doctors, the touches. The bucket is as full as a bucket could possibly be. And the brain also is not in a place where it has an enormous capacity to process all of this
Right.
information.
Right.
So, yeah, there could be beyond sensory overwhelm. There could be sensory meltdown, or there could be complete dissociation, which is the other coping mechanism that people have when there's way too much sensory information. I am just checking out of this experience, which can be very painful when you are really
Hmm.
looking forward to that initial bonding with the baby and you're not able to have it because your sensory system has checked out. So
Hmm.
what I advise, and I the same situation happens by the way for weddings, because it is a huge amount of sensory information. The smells, the sounds, the uncomfortable dress, weird constricting undergarments. Your sensory system is at a million with no time to process anything. And then you're supposed to go into a wedding night, which has a huge amount of touch that's also brand new. So I think that planning is really, really important. So if someone knows that they have tactile defensiveness, and anyone who has tactile defensiveness knows
They
it.
know.
If,
Hmm.
if they don't know the word, they know that they cannot handle textures to the same degree. They cannot handle light touch. They can't handle that. Have a conversation with your doctor or medical provider in advance and say, I have tactile defensiveness. My skin is very sensitive to touch. I would like my first touch experience with my baby to be as pleasant as possible for me and the baby. So I want to please handle the baby after it is cleaned up, after it's wrapped in a
Right.
soft cotton cloth, and after I have had some time to process the birth and have capacity to open myself up to touching this new life that is now part of my life. If you can plan it, and we all try to have a birth plan, right? Which doesn't always go to plan.
Birth
Um,
preferences that we prefer.
right, birth preferences. And as someone who had
Yeah.
two traumatic running into the emergency room C-section births,
Oh my
I
goodness.
know that not everything goes according to plan, but just knowing in advance, this is what is going to happen. These are my preferences, right? And I don't know that there's any medical emergencies that would necessitate a slimy baby being put on your body. I think
Nope.
that, and they may tell you, well, it's better for the baby to get the breast immediately, right? But it's also better for the baby to have a mother who's present. And that's my
Yeah,
preference. My preference is
absolutely.
that I can be present and I can have the capacity to take in the sensations that
Mm,
first time. So
hmm.
really, really, and many people with tactile defensiveness have learned over the years that people don't understand what their experience is and what they're talking about and aren't going to take them seriously. So they have kind of learned to grin and bear it. And I would try to empower, try not to, try to see if they can understand, or at least if they don't understand, respect your preferences that
Hmm.
you want in advance to let them know, please wrap the baby and give me a few minutes to get back to myself so that I can have that initial moment that's not me squirming out of my skin because of what this feels like.
And I think that actually that's a really important function for a doula, like a really
Yeah.
informed doula who understands what you are trying to accomplish could be that person to be like, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to do this. And that could be really helpful. I do want to bring it back to the question about men. So we've discussed how women react to that transition into, kind of what prompts them to come into your office. What about men? What are the things that you're hearing? How do men experience this tactile defensiveness or this transition into touch? What are the things that you're hearing from them?
So for a lot of men, the big challenge is they are expected to perform. They are expected to perform well. They're expected to perform with sensitivity and understanding and with vigor when they have zero experience, understanding, or context for what it is they are supposed to be doing. They are scared, they are nervous, and they also know that if they're not going to do a good job, there's going to be judgment and fear at best fear and worry. And I've gotten different chats that I'm on, so many comments. He didn't get an erection on the first night, maybe he's gay. He wasn't able, maybe he needs Viagra. And or maybe he has sexual trauma that he never disclosed. And the answer is he's a scared young man and he's not a machine. And
Hmm.
just as there's this sort of unspoken expectation that women will just be able to lay down and open up because it's their wedding night, there's also an expectation that a man will have an erection ready to go and know exactly what he's doing on demand. And they're people. Men are people too. Men are
Yeah.
sensitive too. Men are not machines. Men are not that, there's always that classic cartoon of man and it's an on and off switch. And then women, it's 400 different dials and levers and valves. There's reality to that in a way, but men are not an on and off switch. Men
Right.
still have people, they still have a system. And again, from a religious place, very often men have been taught to repress their sexuality to a huge degree for 10, 15 years in some cases, to completely dissociate their
Right.
body from their arousal, to have no arousal based reaction. And now they're again at a moment expected to turn it back on and be completely aroused and have a healthy, normal response that has no guilt anymore. Before, yes, guilt, 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 and now absolutely no guilt.
Right.
Where's that change
Right.
happening? So they're
Right.
coming in with huge expectations on their performance without giving them time to grow into those expectations.
We must, though, see men also who have deep sensitivity to touch. I have to imagine it's not only a women's issue, meaning that there are men
Yes.
that also have a hard time being touched or being affectionate or feeling affection or like being comfortable with somebody touching them. What's that like when you're
Yes,
there and
absolutely.
when you're seeing them?
Men can be tactile defensive just as much as women. Usually it doesn't come up as much in the beginning of marriage because generally speaking, men are doing more of the touch and are sort of more in the doer role in the beginning, and women are more in the receiving role in the beginning. So, the sort of appearance is that women have less control and and men have more control in the beginning of the marriage. So it doesn't always come out at that point because he's sort of controlling the
Mm,
pace and she's not running to touch him as much.
okay.
But there are situations where she's really excited and has been looking forward to touching her husband in certain ways for a very long time. And he's like, whoa, my personal space. That doesn't feel good to me. She's like, what do you mean? Of course it feels good to you. I know it feels good. I've been reading articles, 101 ways to drive your man wild. And he's like, none of this is driving me wild. This is making me
Right.
crazy. Please stop.
Right.
And again, is he scared of rejecting her? Is he scared that he's not normal? Is he scared that maybe there's so much fear about how are my sensitivities going to be perceived and understood by the other person, and not a lot of language to
Mm.
discuss it.
I think also it just brings me to like a reflection of, just touch in general. And as our children grow older, I remember once many years ago, I think it was Rabbi Yanki Horowitz speaking about the idea of like fathers kiss your daughters, fathers give your daughters hugs and kisses. Don't stop when they turn 12. Like give them,
Yes.
they need to experience physical touch from a man who's safe and loving and attentive and appropriate. But even just in general, what the value and necessity of touch. And if we're not having boyfriends and girlfriends, then I think that in often I think people are not being touched at all. There is no touch. There's no, mother kissing her child. There's no father kissing their son. Maybe it's a kiss on the cheek, but it's very not the idea of connected physical touching can become pretty absent, and yet I think probably is pretty needed. But if it becomes, foreign, then we can imagine that it's even more, even though it's desired, it can be kind of complicated to the sensory system when it's reintroduced at a few years later in their personal life, and as well as with children, I imagine, meaning parent to child, that they have to like begin to relearn appropriate connected touching when perhaps it's been totally absent. And just by the way, it's always been something I remember being with my grandfather, and he was quite elderly at the time, and I would come into him and I'd give him a hug and a kiss, and then I would just like sit with him and I'd put my hand on his shoulder or on his arm, and I just was thinking like he has no touch, right? He doesn't have a wife for many, many years. There's nobody giving him hugs. Like it's we need human connection and human touch. And I was just thinking like how the body is soothed and calmed by that kind of safe and connected touch. So just kind of different aspects of the lifespan where touch is so necessary.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we know, right, with infants, we had that first skin to skin contact. We know the hormones that are released during touch. We know how important they are in bonding. What happened is I think again, as a societal thing, is we became very, very scared
Yeah.
of girls touching. When I was in school, a very common thing during free period was everyone was sitting, braiding each other's hair, sitting on each other's laps, laying against each other on couches. Touch was a language of connection. It wasn't certainly sexual, it was affectionate, but there was a learned experience through childhood and adolescence and young adulthood that we use touch as a way to express our feelings and to express our desire and receptivity towards connection. That has stopped.
Hmm.
There is no space, and it's not okay for girls to be touching each other, for girls to be laying in the same bed in camp anymore. There's a huge amount of fear, terror around inappropriate relationships that is causing a lot of bad. And I recently had a conversation with a high school principal who um who was saying, yeah, of course I wouldn't allow that. I'm like, but those inappropriate relationships are not because the girls are casually touching. It's because people are having inappropriate relationships. You're
Hmm.
not protecting from that. You are preventing girls from learning the language of touch, right? This is a love language. But if you never learn it, you can't speak it,
That's
right?
so
And all of a
it's very
sudden,
interesting. That's really interesting because I will say to you that like I'm not 100% sure I'm in agreement only because like as I teach sexual abuse prevention, like so it's one of my other hats that I wear, some of the things that have come up have been like this, and it's not invalidating what you're saying. It's just the perspective taking of that this idea of like, how do I know that that person really wants my head on her lap? Or how do I really know how do we really know that all the girls that are sitting on the couch are comfortable with the body parts flying all over each other, right? And where is the line of this is private space and should not be touched, right? But you're
absolutely,
bringing
there
up
has to
the
be a balance. There
but
has
you're
to be
bringing up the
boundaries.
right, but you're bringing up
But
the
I feel like we've
reality
thrown out the baby
consequence
with
of
the
it.
right.
Yeah,
I feel like
I
we've thrown the
agree.
baby with
I
the
hear
bathwater a
it.
little bit. We
I
have
hear it.
lost touch. We've lost touch between brothers and sisters, which of
Sure.
course can go way, way
Wrong.
wrong.
Right.
But there's healthy, normal touch between brothers and sisters, between fathers and daughters. I also
Right.
heard that speech from Ray Horowitz about fathers. Kiss your daughters. That if you
Right.
don't kiss them, someone else will. They're going to be
Right.
seeking
Right.
it. But
Right.
we're sending people into marriage without a basic understanding that touch is an expression of connection. I have
Mm,
so many girls ask me, but why would he want to do this? Why would he want to touch me? Why would he want to kiss me? Why would he want that? Like, because he
mm,
cares for you and he loves you and he wants to show it to you that way. And that is such a foreign concept because that's not something they experience. They experience a lot of words of affirmation. They got a lot of cards written from their friends. They got birthday parties. They got a lot of ways that love was shown to them, but not touch. And
that's
now
so
there's a
interesting.
lot of touch and they don't know how to interpret it or process it. And, usually there's sort of a continuum. We go from caring touch of when I take care of a baby, right? They get sort of that touch of caring, then into affectionate touch where I'm hugging and kissing and loving and we're having a good time together. And then there's sort of a natural transition into romantic touch and then erotic touch. But
Hmm.
we are jumping straight into erotic touch
Right. Right.
without any warm up into affectionate touch or romantic touch. We're going straight into erotic touch.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
there's no way to process that. What do I do with this information? Where do I put it? I don't know. I just don't want it because it doesn't feel good.
So talk to me a bit about like what treatment looks like in terms of helping a woman. We'll focus on the woman here, like helping a woman become more secure in experiencing touch. What is that like?
Yeah. So I start from a base of safety and attachment. Because I am going to be sort of their partner in this, I need to establish between the woman and myself that I am a safe person who is going to respect your boundaries. So first we have to start off just developing a little bit of a relationship because again, there's no touch that is safe outside of a relationship. So I'm not going to expect you to allow me to touch you on our first session. We don't have a relationship. So we established a relationship. But then we have to create safety around touch. And that means what are the boundaries of touch? What does a person need to be safe in touch? It means that number one, I trust you that you are not going to do something that I am not okay with. Number two, that I can say no, I can express my boundaries and that you will respect them. That if I say I only am okay with you touching up to my wrist, you're not going to say I'm going to sneak in the vegetables and I'm going to, oh, you're okay with this? Let me go an inch higher. Ha, see, you were good. It's not trust. It's not respecting boundaries. That's not okay. So expressing boundaries, hearing those boundaries reflected back to them, and then being really, really comfortable saying, no, I don't want this. So, an exercise that I do sometimes is I say, is it okay if I lick you? No, right? That's a no. That's a no. That's not what was she going to say? What is she going to feel? No, no. My feelings are not in discussion here. That's not okay for you. And you said no, and that was great. Is it okay if I tickle your elbow? No. Right. No,
Hmm.
no. But is it okay if I put my finger on the back of your hand after we discuss it exactly what the parameters are? That could be okay. Like, right, see, do you feel the difference? And I create scenarios where they can feel the difference between a strong no and I'm not sure how that's going to feel, but I'm open and curious to the experience.
Hmm.
And that's really where I want them to be, to a place of I am open and curious to what this experience will be, with the understanding that if I don't like it, I could stop it immediately and there will be no negative repercussions to that. Because for a lot of
That's the
women,
yeah, that
yeah,
negative
if I say
repercussions
no,
piece.
you'll
Hmm.
stop, but I'm going to hear about it and it's going to be a problem, and that can't be. So
And
we
negative
create safe.
repercussions can also be like sulking, right? Like the spouse would
Yeah,
be like, if we
exactly.
did
You're
this
going to
in
be in
a,
a bad mood.
you're gonna be in a bad mood.
You're going to
Yeah.
be in a bad mood. You're going to feel
Hmm.
rejected. I'm not rejecting you. I'm creating my boundaries. So empowering that creative boundaries, empowering the no so that I have the opportunity to say yes. Once we establish all of that, then we actually practice and experience the safety of touch when the boundaries are enforced and when the boundaries are in place. And then I teach the communication to take those skills home. How can you recreate this experience with your husband if this is a married couple? Or how will you create this experience with your husband once you get married, um, understanding this is what I need and it's going to have to go slow. When I'm dealing with newlyweds or kallahs, I speak to whoever is teaching the young man. I said, listen, this is going to be a little bit slower. This is going to be a little more gradual because she's going to need time to get used to touch. So we're not going to tell this guy that his wife is a special case. And no, he's learning everything fresh and new. So let's just teach her fresh and new from a very, conscious of the time needed place. The first night, you're just going to spend time together. You're just going to hang out in your room. Maybe you'll give a little hug and a kiss and go to sleep. That's it. That's all her system can handle. The next night, maybe we could take off a layer of clothing. Maybe we could experience touch in parts of the body that are not normally touched. The next, and to just build up sort of, a
Right.
pathway to intimacy, a pathway to intercourse that is gentler to the system and
Hmm.
teaches positivity each step of the way. One word that I really try to get away from or change, and this is both with newlyweds, with not yet married, and people postpartum who are now trying to come back into sex, is the word success. I was not successful here. I was not successful. We were not successful. Like, we need to redefine success.
Hmm.
Success is not defined by what did or did not happen. Success is defined by, did you have a connective experience?
Right.
If you had a connected experience that felt positive and safe for both of you, that is successful. The details of what happened don't matter. You
Right.
developed a safe, trusting, positive connection during that moment. That is successful. And those will only continue to grow because success breeds more success.
Right. So let me ask you something. When you talk about, I think that you come in with this expectation that both partners want to result in a sexual experience, that the goal is a sexual experience. Have you worked with women who look at you and say, I don't have any desire for this. I don't want this. I know I'm being put into a relationship because this is what I'm supposed to do with my life, but I don't like being touched. I don't want to be touched. And I'm not even that interested in doing what you're asking me to do.
Yeah, so that's most people. Most people are coming in at that
Really?
place. Yeah,
Really?
100%. No one's coming in with, I want to do this and I don't know how. Usually then they're going to coaches and they've gone to coaches already. And coaches can be very helpful in that, in creating like motivation, understanding, and just like paradigm shifts. the women that I'm working with have already been to a coach for the most part and say, no, 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 you don't understand. I don't want to do this. So I don't need someone to come in wanting to have sex. What I need is that they want to want. They want to embark on the journey that will get them to a place where sex feels safe enough to desire.
That
So I
sex
ask
feels
them
so okay, say that one time. That sex
that sex
feels
feels like a safe enough thing to desire, right? Because
mm-hmm,
why don't they want it? Because it doesn't feel safe. But
mm-hmm,
if I can take you on a journey where sex can feel safe, and then that could be something that you would want. But they have
mm,
to want to go on the journey. So I sort of have a very long phone call before I start working with someone to kind of get the idea of, I know you don't want it, but do you at least want it? If you
right,
don't even
right,
want it, if you want to come to me to learn, how can I never have sex again?
right,
Or how can I get my
right.
husband to stop asking me for sex ever again? So that I can't help you with. That is beyond the scope of my licensure. And then I will refer you to a clinical therapist who can help you get past that issue and then come back to me and then we'll work on creating safety. But you have to at least want to participate in the process.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Um, okay, so I want to make sure that because we only have a few minutes left, I want to make sure we get to postpartum. But talk to me a little bit about post-birth trauma, resumption of sex. And I think for the purpose of this conversation, I don't want to focus specifically on post-loss, like post-perinatal loss, but talk a little bit about post-traumatic birth. So there's a sudden, you mentioned having an emergency C-section, right? An event that goes all wrong at birth, or, again, healthy outcome, mom's alive, baby's alive, but that's never going to be the marker for, that everything's going to be fine afterwards. So talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the women and men, please, as they proceed into the next stage of trying to resume sexual intimacy.
Sure. So, we have our two parts, right? We have our mind and our logical frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex that understands that whatever went on in that birthing room was medically necessary and crucial and saved everyone's life. And that is fantastic. And then we have our body and we have our amygdala, which is a very, very primitive brain structure that is working on fear, that is working on protection, that does not understand anything about the medical world, that has just experienced an act of violence on the body without any context of what happened. So someone who has an emergency C-section, their primitive brain, their body experienced being laid down on a table, being ripped into by a strange person wearing a mask and gloves, having organs and body parts removed and all stuffed back in and sewn back up. Someone who had a birth
Don't forget
where
they're
there was
strapped on the
ripping,
table, both
strapped to
hands
the
out.
table, can't move
Yeah.
and numb and
Yeah.
numb and completely unable to protect themselves in any way. Someone who had a birth where there was a huge amount of tearing and then it had to be sewn up and repaired, now there's scar tissue. Their body doesn't understand what happened. They just know that something horrifically violent happened around their vagina. So, okay, so now, 6 weeks have passed, postpartum period is over, they got the
Wait,
clearance
wait,
to resume
postpartum, no
sexual.
postpartum period. Postpartum period is
Right.
at least a year. But you
Right.
mean
No, I'm
the
sorry.
the
The no
clearance
sex
for
period.
sex.
This clearance
Exactly.
of sex has been given,
Right.
and you're medically clear and the scar tissue's gone and the stitches are removed and everything's all set to go. The body does not know any of this. The body knows that something horrifically violent has happened in that area and it is responding as a trauma victim. It is responding as a body that has been violated violently and aggressively and traumatically. And what we can see is a response that doesn't seem to make sense. I wasn't violently raped. Why is my body reacting as if I was? Why all of a sudden am I experiencing horrific vaginismus and I can't open up and I can't let him in and I'm experiencing pain and everything's burning and everything's killing and all the doctors are telling me that nothing's wrong. And then I went to the pelvic floor PT who said that nope, the biggest dilator can go in and everything's fine and there's nothing physically wrong. Right. There is nothing physically telling you this is not safe, but there is everything experientially telling your body that this is not a safe place to have someone right now or ever in the future. So, whatever the process is that a woman who experienced violent sexual assault would have to go through to be okay to experience a safe sexual experience, a woman who experienced a traumatic birth experience may need to go through a very similar process of again learning this is safe, this is okay. I do not have to react in this way because I'm with a person who is safe, who is respecting me, who's not going to rip me open. the same
Right.
process needs to happen because the amygdala does not know the difference.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting because, like, I think that somebody in the medical world might hear this conversation and be like, "That is so dramatic, right? It wasn't violent. It was just a surgery. It wasn't terror because it was."
Mhm. Oh, okay, got you back.
Okay, sorry, I don't know what happened. That the body does not necessarily know that there is a differential, right? That there is somebody might say like you're being dramatic, but I think what we're saying is that actually, but on a body level, not drama. It's
Right.
physically
Well, think of what a
experienced as
C-section
threatening.
was 500 years
Sure.
ago, right? It was
Oh, for
exactly
sure.
this. It was a
Yeah.
violent ripping open of the body. So the fact that
Yeah.
medical, technology has advanced to the point where it's not violent, it is a relatively, safe procedure to go through.
Right.
The body doesn't know that. It didn't go to medical
Right.
school. It knows what it's experiencing.
It was really interesting. I had a conversation with somebody, and I can't remember who it was, who told me that, and I apologize if it was somebody on my previous podcast, is where they said that the person was going through a plan C. Oh, I know who it was, and it was somebody who was making a plan for a C-section. She was hoping for a VBAC, and then but her very wise midwife said, and we're also going to make a plan for a more trauma-informed C-section, because there were parts of that C-section that were incredibly upsetting to her. So, for example, and I'm again, no comment on the choice, but that the physician said, we won't put the baby on your chest because some women find it very overwhelming. Meaning, while you're strapped down on the table, still being sewn back up again, she said, I want the baby on my chest. And the doctor said no, because you might be flooded. Like you might be emotionally flooded. I've never heard this before. And so her plan was to say, well, and this is actually what she did the first birth, where she's like, well, can we try? Like, can we put the baby on my chest and then you'll decide if I'm flooded or not, or I'll decide if I'm flooded emotionally. And so her birth plan for a potential C-section included so much more choice in those experiences. So when you have that, those women may have an incredibly non-traumatic after C-section experience. And that's so much about, the conversations we've actually been having on the podcast about, a more trauma aware when coming to C-section births and experiences, but that's for another time. I think in the last minutes we have together, I would love to hear from you, like one or two misconceptions that women have either about their bodies or about physical touch or about sex. What are some of the things that are misconceptions that keep showing up in your offices?
I think the biggest misconception is the idea that I should be feeling aroused if everything's happening that aroused me before. That my body is the same that it was before and my system is the same that it was before. And that if before, when I was an 18-year-old newlywed, my husband looked at me a certain way and I was ready to jump into bed, that now, as a 24-year-old postpartum woman with a baby currently nursing at my breast, I should be feeling the same way. And the fact that I'm not means that something is wrong with me.
Mm,
And the biggest thing that I tell women is there is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken and nothing needs to be fixed. Everything is working perfectly. Your body is trying to protect you from something that it thinks is a threat, and that you're different now. Your body is different. Your brain is different. You're going to need different stimulation. Doesn't mean something's wrong. It means that things have changed. It means that things have grown, and that's going to continue happening throughout your life. And wait till you hit your 40s. Everything's going to change again, and you're going to have to learn an entire new experience. So that's the first thing, is that there's nothing broken if you don't have spontaneous desire. There is responsive desire. And we talk about that a lot, that you're maybe going to need different circumstances and different contexts so that you can feel aroused as the process goes. You just have to be open and feel safe enough to try, knowing that you can say no at any time if it doesn't feel right or it doesn't feel good. So that's the very first misconception, is that I should be feeling a certain way.
mm,
Um, Another big misconception is, again, about men. I think there's a lot in the religious world, in the secular world, a lot of very negative messaging about men being
huh,
uncontrollable animals and beasts
yep,
who only want one thing, and they're looking at you like a piece of meat. And I've literally heard all these things as a girl myself.
absolutely.
How am I supposed to trust him? Now, because we have a signed marriage contract, now he's not an animal and a beast who's looking at me with respect. There's so much negative messaging about men. Our men are good men. They
Yeah.
care
I've
about
been
that. They
saying
may
this
not
for
have all the
years.
education they
Yeah.
need. They may
Yeah.
not have all the information they need. And as I think as a community, we need way more resources for people to learn what they need to learn about sex, about making it a positive, good experience. But they're good people who care about their wives, who only want them to be happy. I have so many women who tell me, well, if I tell my husband no, he's going to be so. I'm like, do you think he likes what's happening now?
Absolutely.
Do you
Right.
think
Right.
any good man wants to have sex with a woman who doesn't want to have sex with him?
Right. Right.
He doesn't. He
Exactly.
hates this.
No.
He's paying thousands of dollars for you to get help because if all he wanted was compliance, he has that.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
wants you to be there with him. So
Yeah.
that's a very, very big,
I love
misconception.
that.
I
Yeah.
would say the last one is the fact that there are artificial timelines that I should be ready for sex 24 hours after marriage or within a week of marriage, or that I should be ready for sex 6 weeks after I have the baby because the doctor gave me the clearance. There are no, or I've been in therapy for X amount of months and I should be at. There are no timelines except your own system and what it is ready for. And we have to respect our internal systems and listen to them and not try to force or micromanage things to happen at a certain rate or pace because we think that's the normal way. It's we will be
Mm.
ready when we are ready and not a moment before. And the more we respect that, the faster it will go and the safer it will feel.
I love what you just said. Thank you. Those were outstanding. And I really feel actually just coming back to that second point, this is something I've actually talked about for years. Like, how do we not respect our men enough? Meaning, like, I think we need to raise our men up on a pet. Like, our men are better than what we're describing them to be. Like,
Yes.
we just give them more credit than what we're giving them. I remember having a conversation with a woman who had a very difficult time getting to mikvah emotionally, and I said to her, she's like, I know I just have to do it, and my husband can't handle it, and I've been so far, been so many weeks without seeing him and being with him physically. And I said to her, like, let me ask you a question. I'm going to go on the assumption your husband's a good guy. And I said, what would he prefer? The woman who just is subservient, who just says, fine, I'll just do it, or just like doesn't object, or the woman who says, I'm really having a hard time going to mikvah. I literally walking the streets of New York. Like, I'm having a hard time going. I'd love to get a hug from you. I'm so lost and sad. I don't want to get pregnant again. And I'm scared. Which do you think he would prefer? And it wasn't even a question. The answer was number two, right? The answer was no, he would much rather me be fully present when I'm ready to be fully present. I said, so can we trust him and respect him enough to say, tell him how you're feeling? And he was wonderful to her, as I knew he would be. And I think that this is something that, the more we can, the more knowledge, the more education, the more we put out there, the more people will grow in their relationships with themselves as well as with each other. So thank you for this conversation. This was fantastic.
Thank you. I really enjoyed speaking with you today and letting people know that there are some other things out there to explore and
Right. Really
really get
interesting
in touch with
resources.
themselves.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put I'll put your contact information in the chat. I will say that you and I discussed this beforehand, that you work closely with therapists so that you are
Yes, yes. I
an
feel like I do
allied
need to say
profession.
that.
Yes, this is
This
not
I am
solo.
not
And
I am
yeah,
not a clinical therapist. I advise all of my clients to be seeing a clinical therapist to deal with the feelings and emotions that will come up. And if they choose not to, and we get to a point where I can't do my work anymore, I will stop seeing them until they can deal with the emotional thing that
yeah.
just came up because that's not something that I do and not something that I will attempt to do.
I love hearing yet another allied profession that supports women and couples. So thank you so much.
Thank you.